licenses and divide it by the number of students. So when they say that, oh, there's 24 students in the classroom, that's BS. Go and walk into that classroom and you'll see 30, 35 kids. So, you know, it's too bad that it has to come to where the union is now, and one has to ask, are they actually doing it with still using these overall number of licenses, or when this gets done and they say a first grade class is going to have 22 students, or kindergarten, I forget what the number was there. If you walk into the classroom, is that really going to be the number of students? You know, granted that you have this situation. Okay, what happens when we have 40 first graders and we set it at 19, and now we have 2 extra? Well, what do we do? Well, you know what? How do we solve that problem so that the teachers aren't being abused? It's not only that the teachers are being abused, but the students in that room are being abused when you start dumping all these students in there and you don't have any discipline mechanism anymore, and you have these out of control students. Why do you think Matamidi gets over 1 out of 4 of their students come from other districts? There's 750 students in the Matamidi system that comes from outside of the districts. Why do they come?
Well, let me hitchhike on that a little bit. I, at the end of my teaching career, was doing some working part-time in the special ed. I also had work experience, but I had multiple licensures, and I watched what happened. Now, you can place 4 or 5 special ed kids in a class of 24, and that works. However, it's like a teeter-totter that tilts. As you approach more than a minor percentage, and like I watched a biology class with 30 kids, they had 12 special ed kids, and even though they had an aide in there to help, which they were having me work as one, which I was obviously well qualified for, but what happens is the class tilts, and it no longer is the norm, you know. So and so the whole thing is a drain down. The sites get lower, and I knew one teacher that was teaching wildlife biology. She couldn't take it, and she quit in the middle of the year, and this was a seasoned professional. The woman was about 45 years old. Life was too short. But I saw that happen again and again. Now, when I was running my DECA program, one of the work experienced handicapped teachers would send me 1 student a year, okay? And the kid obviously could not pass the class, but the function of that was the student would have to rise to the level of social competence of the rest of the other 23 kids in the class. They would be herded in, and wait a minute, my behavior has to rise to meet the norm of the population, rather than having a cluster of these students that are perhaps
that
socially
are now setting the norm
and drawing the average down, bringing more social ineptness and problems. And so it's a very delicate balance when you're putting mainstreaming special ed students. I mean, it's a wonderful concept, but you really have to be careful with it, because it can be like, you know, checking your gas tank with a match. It can blow up on you very easily if you're not careful with the numbers and how you do it.
And even in today's Pioneer Press, the corporate newspaper, there was an article about a charter school that closed. I believe it was in West St. Paul, and that the gist of the article, when I kind of scanned through it, was the fact that the kids that used this, it was general something school, and they didn't fit in to the large school setting, the big high school. They were overwhelmed. They were truant. They didn't. There was no focus for them. And when they got into the into a small charter school, they were able to find their place. And so the student, what are we switching cameras in there? There. Good job. You know what I want to say right here, right here. Last week after the show, I had a few comments made to me. Bob, you're too hard on the people in the control room. Well, you know, folks, I want to share this with you. I spent a lot of time gathering information and setting up for this show. And you have to be here where I am and look through the window into the control room. And when you see them in there laughing and making fun of turning the lights down, shutting the sound down, doing all kinds of things that they get a big joke out of. Yes, I get upset about it, but we're gonna be more positive in that regard.
Well, part of it, we've had some technical difficulties. The control room is due for some updates and upgrades, which is going to happen in the next few months. So hopefully we can alleviate some of these problems. But it's challenging to coordinate and first of all, get the information and then get it all out. But I do want to hitchhike in an article I read today. They're talking about vocational schools and how the state used to have like 20 or 30 of them. And now they're cutting the funding. And of course, it used to be they'd send the dummies to the car class, auto mechanics. Well, that's no longer the case because you have to do computer diagnosis and use computers extensively. Well, they're cutting and cutting. Instead of getting a set of cheap socket wrenches to fix the car, now you have to have a computer. And they're cutting back so much with the state and federal funding, there are very few programs around that these students can go and actually develop skills to be immediately employed. Now, our society is getting more complicated, and one of the concepts we've talked about underemployment, we've talked about unemployment, and another strategy that we have to look at in this society is interim employment, which I'm kind of introducing a concept. And that is, a student's going to school. The price of school is very expensive. They have a long-term goal. Well, maybe they're going to have to be a hairdresser or a bartender or whatever else it is along the way until they get to where they're going, because maybe there are not enough jobs that are unskilled. Again, remember, only 15% of the jobs that we have in this economy are totally unskilled. The rest, the other two-thirds, 65% people have to have skills, and the other 20% is college degrees.
And when you say skilled, we're talking like auto mechanic, electrician, carpenter,
plumber, even low-voltage electricians. I mean, that is a growing career because we all have thermostats and computers and all kinds of wiring that isn't 110 volts.
Energy, automations. You know, we have a phone call. Let's try to stay up with the phone calls tonight. Caller, are you with us? Question or comment?
Hi, Bob Zick.
Good evening.
Excellent. Good evening. I always enjoy your show, and it's always fun to watch. And I think your edition here of Low Tech Lauren is actually very good. I have a question for Low Tech Lauren, and I was wondering if he ever did any of his, done the math on the back of a napkin to figure out what this costs taxpayers in the school district for all this special ed. And I really don't understand this special ed. Are these the kids who have a problem focusing, or is it something different? In the way you two gentlemen are talking there tonight, it sounds like the taxpayers are dumping just endless resources in kids that are watching movies all day in the classroom, while the so-called best and brightest, the future of the great USA, they're like 1 to 60 in the class, and I didn't know if he's ever done the equations. The other thing, Bob, I think the thing that, because, there's more people always talking about you on your show, and I think the thing that, I'm watching again back to that city of Maplewood, I seen that, I've heard over from the former Mayor Bob Cardinal over at his house when I was over there for an event and other places. When they talk about you, what they Well, what apparently is that although you're just a guy doing a volunteer show, you're having a bigger impact on the community than all these, $200,000 employees. And I don't know if it's just that you simply try to tell the truth, or it's that all these guys are so wound up in their side stories and their make-believe worlds and their let's have them believe worlds that they lose track of what their job is. But in that case, John Nephew over there at the city of Maplewood, he's blaming, publicly. He's out there saying the trash collectors did him in because, they're not happy that he forced him to have that big collector, that big giant corporate collector out of Arizona instead of having the family collectors. But then when you're talking to these guys individually, you see that the real thing that this John Nephew is all wound up about is you, Bob Zick. He thinks you, by talking about him, caused him to lose the election.
Well, so
give us more on that special ed. Thank you.
Caller. Now we lost the caller. Are you there, caller?
Yes.
Well, are you saying that the Bob Zick show has a bigger impact than the Trash Haulers Association when it comes?
Well, and it's hard for me to say. I'm just giving you what I'm hearing, when talking to these people who are politically involved. At least I think they are. They're saying that the trash haulers did some mailings and things like that. But what really alerted people and what really alerted the trash haulers of what was going on in Maplewood was you and watching your show, I guess. And I find it hard to believe that a guy sitting on cable TV just bringing some simple facts out actually shakes up the whole community. But these guys who are the elected officials seem to believe that's the case, and these public officials, and I've seen how they scrowl at you. There's that big guy who sits there as a stump on a log who looks like a big Cabbage Patch doll. And he always looks like he's hostile to you. And, I thought he was the power broker and decision maker. And, the way he treats you is like you slighted him, as if you took his, power away. And I don't understand it.
Caller, have you ever gone on YouTube and just put in Bob Zick show?
Yeah, that's fun to do because I put in Bob Zick show and all the past shows come up. And I think that these guys are maybe staying up all night watching the show too. But you got a lot of data out there. And you look at some of those, these community papers or, like the two Lilly brothers, the state representatives, and you see the kind of stuff they constantly put out there as being representative of what's going on, and you say, and then you watch your show and you compare the two, and you say, wow, what's more valuable, watching your show for an hour or going out and trying to pick up one of their shopping guides papers to try to figure out what's going on in the community? I mean, more and more I hear, even the people who there's so many people who are just obsessed with you. I remember that former state representative Scott Waslick and the current representative Leon Lilly. They can hardly say a kind thing about you. They mock you and they curse you, and I'm thinking, well, why are you so consumed about Bob Zick if he's so wrong and so meaningless? Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I always tell people that when somebody is bad-mouthing somebody, just, look at who's saying it.
Yeah, look at the source and in the reason behind it. But I wanted to answer a question he had about special ed. And one of the interesting things, I had multiple certifications, and I, in fact, did work in that the last few years. By definition, 48% of the high school population can be considered special ed for whatever reason. They have a very soft, fuzzy definition.
The system gets extra funding if they
it's a reimbursement issue. You're absolutely right.
It's reimbursement. If they can label your child special ed, we have another call right away. If they can label your child special ed, once they do that, the parent loses direction of their child. The system now is in control of that child. Well, we've had some parents that have had nightmares after the system, they agreed to have their kid labeled special ed.
They have an IEP, individual education plan, and they take it over, and many times they're just pushing people along. I mean, when I was working there, I would not give the kids the answers. I would work with them to make them figure them out if I was assisting them for taking a test. You know, and I used to tell my regular students before I ended up getting into special ed, brains and muscles are the same. They have to be exercised. If you don't exercise these kids' brains, it's going to be mush. The same thing with muscles. So if we're turning to, you know, they talk about the obesity and the flabby, well, let's face it, not only are Americans' children's bodies getting flabby, their brains are getting flabby. I mean, they want to play video games, and how realistic is that in life? As I've said many times before, the most important teacher in a child's life is his parent. They have to set an example, they have to work with them, and they have to give them structure and learning, and it's crucial parental input. And when they fall down on that because they're too busy or have different philosophies, the kid is going to suffer. Again, flabby bodies, flabby minds.
The parents just say, well, turn the child over to the system. It's
You're
the
right.
system's responsibility. Okay, let's take another phone call, and then I have a couple things I want to add to the conversation before we move on to, we have some video tonight too again. Caller, are you with us? Question or comment?
Well, I have a comment for you, Bob.
Yes, go ahead.
I understand that. I know you go to a lot of city council meetings, put a lot of time and effort. You're out long hours to gather this information. And I want to thank you for bringing Lauren on, because he does bring some important information with, as he talked about the schools and how the average has been dropped. In Matamidi, we were number 2 in the state, but now that we've encouraged open enrollment, we've dropped down to number 7, because it's the same thing. We bring people from out of district that are interested only in the athletics, not the academics, and our scores have been dropping. So as you introduce people who are not have a vested interest in that school, it is bringing down the average of the school itself. Now, I know Stillwater is losing well over 190 students from Matamidi to open enrollment, and we know that has robbed over $1 million from the Stillwater School District. Maybe your callers could, if they would look it up, find out how many students come from White Bear, how many students come in from North St. Paul and Hugo, and explain how this devastates their. We try to take some of their best students, and we get them in here. But unless you're invested in the community, these kids they don't know 1/4 of the kids in their school. And Lauren, you are right. It does take the average of the classroom down when you introduce, and I'm not saying they're handicapped when they're coming from out of district, but they're not the asset that the school districts think they are. We're robbing the other school districts from funding.
All right, thank you, caller. Well, let's touch on that. When the superintendent Mark Larson came on board, he came in what?
About 2006, I believe.
2006. In 2006, Matamidi had zero
open enrollment.
So there were 0 students coming from other districts into Matamidi.
And the budget, I want to add, is $2.69 million. That's what they were spending.
So let's call it $2.7 million, 0 open enrollment. This is in year 2006. Now let's forward to
2010.
2010.
There's 734, I believe, students that are open enrollment. The budget has now swelled to $6.5 million.
$6.5 million, and that does not include the levy of 48 million or 40 whatever.
Yeah, that is not including the 47.1 million.
48 million.
That they invested to not only make a middle school, they were making a whole campus.
And then they just did another levy
for technology.
Technology, how many million was that for?
I think it was $1 million or $2 million, I'm not sure. I just know it was.
And then they're going to come back for another levy
Next year.
Next year, and that's going to be an operating levy.
Yes.
And so the thing is, folks, when you start looking at the cost per student, you have to, what these school districts don't do is they don't average in the cost of the $48 million facility. They say, well, you can't add that. You know, a normal business has to include the cost of the facility, of heat and light and everything else, so when they put their product out the door, they can price it so they can stay in business. But these school districts say, oh, well, that's not fair that we have to include those kind of costs in the students. So when you take the district's budget and you divide it, their whole total budget, and you divide it by the number of students, you know, St. Paul, you're over $16,000 per student. Well, with Matamidi, now that you have over 1 out of 4 students from out of district, whatever happens when they go in these $48 million building program, if all of a sudden people would say, you know what, Matamidi is no longer number 2, it's number 7, and maybe our home district is actually provides a better education, and now Matamidi, and what's interesting is they ought to call it the Grant School District, because when they get done, every school is going to be in the city of Grant. The only thing that's going to be in Matamidi is the business office, and they might as well incorporate that in the Bahamas to get a better tax rate. I mean, this is ridiculous, folks. So if all those 700 and some students leave the district, all of a sudden the residents of the Matamidi School District, Grant, and the other cities, they're going to be stuck paying for all that.
Well, we're stuck paying right now because the state only transfers in $6,000, and the latest figure I just saw was $12,400 per student. So for every one of those kids coming in, we got to pick up $6,400. Okay, now following your scenario, let's say they all leave. Okay, we're still stuck with the fixed costs of that new school, the expanded athletic fields, and believe me, they even, how fancy this is, they have lockers for the visiting team when they come. Now, when I worked in my school district, White Bear, when a visiting team came, they had to use the girls' locker room, and the boys used theirs if it was like basketball team or football team. Well, they have a visiting team locker room. They put a new football field in with AstroTurf. They went down 4 foot, put 3 foot of aggregate in there, then a foot of sand. And by the way, this is an 8 to 10 year life, so they're going to have to spend, I don't know how many $100,000 to replace the turf all over again. I mean, I understand we have to have some athletics, but given the obesity problem we have with children, wouldn't it make sense to have intramural where 1 hour a day, every kid had to get out there and exercise, walk, jump?
But Lauren, you know why they had to put in that AstroTurf? Because the original plan was the runoff they were going to take and put into a pond and then pump that water back up for irrigation purposes. The problem with that is that water was all contaminated because of the fact that it was a former dump, had all these toxins in it, so they were going to just keep recycling the toxins back onto the grass, so they had to put in an artificial turf.
Oh, I thought it was so the cheerleaders wouldn't graze at halftime. Maybe not, huh?
Look what's laying there.
Oh, gee whiz. I got a screw loose and it just came out of my glasses. The people have been telling me I have a screw loose for years.
I noticed the screw from his glasses laying on the table. Well, what I wanted to add was, when you talk about the schools, and of course, I worked in St. Paul schools in all the buildings, 65, 70 of them, and would see what was going on, and you know, firsthand knowledge and firsthand observation, and then had of course all the friendships with teachers throughout the district. And as being in the trades, we tore out all the shop classes, all the the metal shops, the wood shops, and you know what we replaced the shop classes with?
No, what?
Exercise rooms.
Really?
So these kids could, because they didn't get any exercise, now they could go down and use the exercise room. Well, it was usually for the staff anyway. But so now, instead of actually getting a life skill, they got to go down and exercise. Isn't that nice that was the direction?
Well, let me share a story with you. It used to be that kids would take an auto tech class so they'd learn some basics. It's just basic consumerism. You have to know about your car you drive when, you have to know about checking the oil, the radiator, etc. And a friend of mine, his nephew, called him and said, "Gee, I'm changing this tire, but I've got the 4 nuts around the wheel off, but I can't get that big one off in the center." Well, that's the one that holds the axle in place. And the kid
he had to have a cheap car if he only had 4 in the first place.
Well, 4 or 5,
yeah.
It was a little car, but
some of them only have 4.
But
I with that comment, I would say, can you imagine how these people would be befuddled if they had those cars up till, I think, well, in the 40s, one side of the car had left-handed lug nuts on
and one
it,
had right,
so that they couldn't back out from the motion of the wheel. And so, that would really, and we have another phone call. The other thing I want to say before we take this phone call is that charter school that was talked about, general, whatever, military, I think it was 4-star general. The fact that because the state was holding back funding, and unlike the public schools that could just go out and have a levy or go out and borrow money at 1 or 2%, these charter schools didn't have that luxury. They couldn't just put out for a levy, and they couldn't borrow money at these special low rates. And the lending institutions were saying, well, okay, this is a little more iffy proposition because the taxpayers aren't on the hook. And so a lot of these charter schools that provided that special opportunity for students that didn't necessarily fit into the main system or wanted a different focus are having to close their doors. And so, it's really bad that the government schools can find ways to always extract the money they need, but that the charter schools and the non-public schools have to close their doors.
If I can hitchhike on that, they have a lot of ALCs, alternative learning centers. Well, I have the letters mean something else, I mean, in slang, but what I'm saying...
the last 2 parts are last chance.
Yeah.
You work on the A.
And what I'm saying is I understand that, but maybe the students have to learn some structure. It's not that tough these days to graduate from high school. It's kind of like falling on a log. You just kind of have to be there. You don't have to work that hard. There's a variation of classes. Yes, there's advanced placement. But you can take the regular math classes, the regular English classes, and it isn't rocket science to get out of high school. But if poor little Johnny is, oh, geez, it's too traumatizing. I'm sorry, I'm the old school, coming back to bodies and muscles and brains are the same things. They need exercise. And yeah, you got to make your kid exercise. He's got to do his homework. He's got to, learn multiplication tables, and making excuses doesn't lead to an educated public. I mean, for example, getting some of away from the basic education, it's just insanity. You should be able to read, write, spell, and do math, make change when you graduate from high school.
We were talking to a very local, successful business person, and his comment was, and he was talking about his own grandkids, that when the power goes off and the computer gets shut down, or the calculator goes off,
they're lost.
They're lost. They can't. They have no clue. They have no clue.
It's so important that students learn process. Why 4 goes into 16, 8 times 12, those types of things. I would have to reteach markup and markdown in my DECA class, and they would have me sit there with the calculators. What do I punch into what? Well, you have to understand process, why you punch what into what to get the percentages, and if you understand process, then go on to using additional items.
Let's take the phone call. Caller, are you with us? Question or comment?
Thanks, Bob Zick. This is an excellent show tonight. The question I have on this education, I heard on the Mike Erickson Variety Show, which was on before your show this evening, he said, and he's very involved in the White Bear Lake School District, Mike Erickson, who was the host of this show, was saying that in the White Bear Lake School District, I think he said 58% of the kids in the White Bear Lake School District, if I recall his percentage, actually get college credit through the courses they teach in that White Bear Lake High School. And he said that some kids in White Bear Lake, and he implied that it was quite a few, actually get 1, 2, or 3 semesters done of their 4-year college degree while they're going to high school, because high school in White Bear Lake is so wonderful. Now, the question I also have for Lauren there is this question on the special ed, because I thought the special ed teachers had to be the most qualified, have the most master's and PhD degrees, and that's why they actually make the most money, because they're teaching special ed, and that takes the most qualifications, far more qualification than a basic classroom teacher. And and that seems kind of bizarre and confusing, and I wish you could explain that.
Well, actually,
now, a question I have for Mr. Zick is, I know because you have to wrangle with those governments just to get in there and get the information. I know there was a guy over there in Maplewood called the most famous man in Maplewood, because he was trying to get some information that Kathy Juneman, she clobbered him, and, he probably suffered from post-traumatic stress syndrome. And I was wondering, did they ever compensate him for all that she used the government to put him through? Thank you.
Well, Kathy Dingy, city council person, is who he's referring to. But no, Mr. Wyckoff never was compensated. But you answer that, and then we got some film footage we got to get to.
Okay, real quickly, you get a degree in special ed. That's especially like marketing or biology, and many teachers do get a master's degree. I had to go back and get multiple certifications, take some extra classes, because I was originally certified in marketing in DECA. And when I worked in vocational center, they also, because I went to a different town each day, I was out of Litchfield, and I went to 4 other towns, and the superintendent says, hey, we have 2 special ed kids here, and we'd like to place them and put them on a work program, and they only had 2 or 3 kids on that. And I said, okay, I will go back and take some classes, get some certification, do my intern shadowing. And so then I was allowed to have both certifications. That would be like if you were certified both to be a master plumber and a master electrician, you could do both. Okay, but they do not have to have additional additional degrees. You don't have to have a master's degree. You can go in with a 4-year degree and be special ed. You'll find many of the teachers do go on, because that means more money in the salary schedule. You get your PhD.
Lanes and steps.
Lanes and steps. Okay.
So lanes and steps are degrees and longevity.
Yep.
Okay, so let's move. The interesting, he brought up some names there, but the city manager of White Bear Lake, what's his name? Mark Sather?
Sather, yeah.
Does ice boating. I see in the paper where he went through the ice twice this season.
Well, I want to compliment White Bear for doing such a good job. I think it's excellent that they're getting all those students so they get more credit, so they get their 4-year degree, and then they can join the Occupy Wall Street movement.
And get their college education paid for. Folk, to that vein, we were talking about tuition. And when I went to the University of Minnesota way back when, and I was working at Montgomery Ward's. I'm going to date myself here, but I made $67 a week working at Montgomery Ward's, and tuition for a quarter at the University of Minnesota, Minneapolis campus, was $64. So I could work 1 week and pay for a whole quarter of tuition, and as many credits as I wanted to take. To be full-time, you had to take 12, but you could take 18, or if you went over 18, I think you had to have a counselor's approval. But look at the cost of education, the way we've run it up, and the reason that I see happening is when I was going to school, government came out with this tuition, loans, free money, free money. And as soon as the colleges and the universities could see that the students were flush with money, they had this...
It keeps raising.
Up went the tuition, up, and the students, you know, for them it was play money. All they had to do was say, give me some money, and, you know, and so look where we're at now.
I have one quick question, Bob. I had to ask you, when you went to school at the U of M, did you ride your pet dinosaur both ways then? Or?
My pet what?
Pet dinosaur.
Dinosaur? No.
You're not that old.
No, actually I use public transportation.
Okay.
All right. Let's play. We don't have another phone call waiting, do we? All right, we're good. Let's take and play
number one.
Play number one. This is from last night, and I want to set this up a little bit. I was over at the Grant City Council meeting last night. Lauren was there. Lauren's on the Cable Commission over here for the City of Grant, representing the City of Grant. And actually I had a conversation with the mayor today, Tom Carr. And he asked, one of the questions he asked is, Bob, why do you come to the council meetings at Grant? You know, besides having a vested both financial and property interest in Grant, and like I do in so many other cities, that I said, because we've done this show for 25 years, and that, you know, you're going to see me at maybe a Roseville City Council meeting in North St. Paul, Maplewood, South St. Paul, and we get the information to provide to the citizens. And when people can see how some of the other cities operate, you have to remember most of these cities operate out of the same playbook. It's called the League of Minnesota Cities. So when cities learn how to circumvent the citizens, the taxpayers, the voters, and one of the big scams that's going on now, and maybe we can have a caller call in on this, because a couple callers talked to me, or viewers talked to me about this. The way these cities are finding, and it's all propagated through this League of Minnesota Cities, to go around the taxpayers and the voters, not to have a levy when they build these big complexes similar to what Matamidi School District did. And so down there in Cottage Grove, the citizens are outraged, and Cottage Grove even went so far as to kill public access television so citizens couldn't share information with other citizens. That's how despicable they are down there. I think they're more corrupt than Maplewood, and that's really saying something. So to that end, the new plan out there is to take and fund these projects in a manner that they don't require going to the voters. So when you have these building projects of $18 million, $40 million, and you circumvent the people that are paying for it, you know, these legislators, like the caller said, you have legislators like Leon Lilly and Chuck Uygur and Nora Slawick and those people like that. Well, why don't they rein in things like open enrollment? Put a ceiling on those. Why don't they actually protect the taxpayers and stop the abuse of these cities funding these projects by borrowing money outside of the required process?
If I could add one more city to that list, the city of Hugo, I know, the residents had turned down both a fire station and a city hall. And if you've been up to Hugo lately, you notice they both have a shiny new city hall and a brand new fire station.
There you go.
And they did some shenanigans to get that in when, in fact, they were voted down. So that's going to be in line. They get the playbook, they learn how to circumvent citizens voting, and they're off and running. And a lot of times it's professional people that are doing it. They're a city manager, quote unquote, and they're shepherding them through the maze.
Yep, and that's a B-class city. Grant is an A-class city, which says that the elected officials, the city council, which includes the mayor, actually make the decisions. The power is not like in a B class, like Maplewood, where you have two city managers, and they decide what's going to happen and how to circumvent the taxpayer voters.
No accountability, basically.
No accountability. So the reason, and I told this to the mayor of Grant when I talked to him, I said, you know, one of the reasons I come and we play pieces from Grant is because the city of Grant actually runs a very tight ship, very frugal, and when we averaged it out, in comparison, Maplewood spends $4,300 per home, and Grant was $600 per home. So, and then look at the quality of life. Would you rather live in worn-torn Maplewood or the hinterland of Grant, which is open country?
The other thing that's going to tie into this piece is they actually...
I might add, only 4 miles from Maplewood. What a difference.
They actually encourage citizen participation and comment, and I believe that's the first clip we have.
This is the comparison, and this is what I told the mayor. I want to show Grant the way the mayor allows the citizens to participate in their government, unlike, say, Billy Rossbach, mayor over at Maplewood, that tells the citizens, sit down and shut up or we're going to have the police take you out of here. So let's play that clip.
Is that the city does not know about, that we need to talk about things we should know about. Now, I prefaced this before and I'm going to say it again. We're not going to rehash things over and over again. There's certain topics that have been, we've used public comment as a bully pulpit to talk about those. That's not the time. We've heard those topics before. Also, it needs to be grant related, so we need to make sure we focus on that. So if you're not on topic and you're not saying something, you know, that is meaningful to grant and that we should all hear, then I'll ask you to sit down. But other than that, all the public comments we can get. So anybody want to say anything for public comment?
Bob Tufte, Jasmine Avenue.
Okay. You also notice an old schoolhouse, Wheelander Schools. They don't have some grandiose, new console chambers. They didn't go out and spend like Cottage Grove wanting to spend $18 million so they can have a new city hall with these elevated console seats so the console can look down at their subjects.
Yes.
Look at how you can run a city. I think Grant is 2 or 3 times the size of...
Double Maplewood.
Double the size of Maplewood. And, it's a rural setting. If 4 miles from Maplewood, you can actually get into some sanity and actually afford to live there. So I just wanted to show that. Now we're going to have some actual examples of the kind of conversation that we're going to go to the next piece, and I addressed the council over there and brought up a couple comments, and actually one of the comments had to deal with this operation.
SCC, yes.
Suburban Community Channels. And so to that end, I thought it was, I wanted to tell the council over there that they, along with the way they operate the city in its entirety in such a good manner, that they also have made good appointments to their different commissions over there. And one of those commissions, of course, is the Cable Commission. And I want to say that around here, and you'll hear me say it on this piece when they're loading it up because it's on the computer. Around here, when we have problems, and you see it all the time, things that aren't working here, just like last week, that it's typical, almost like typical government, trying to make something happen. Private industry, it happens tomorrow. Mm-hmm. Government, it happens, well, couple months, a year, whatever.
Well, the neat thing about Grant, too, there's been some changes out there, and they're actually getting more efficient. For example, the grading contract, and I did one of my shows on the grading, we have a new contractor. They got 40% more grading for the same money. And the contractor didn't have to come from 15 miles away. It was a local contractor that said, here's our bid, we'll do it.
Well, that's one thing about, and we have another phone caller saying, but that's one of the things I noticed with Grant. They really contract with local people. And they have this give and take rapport. And then you go to Maplewood, and they go all the way down to Arizona to get the big multi-corporation that sends all their profits down to Arizona, rather than keep the local
people going,
like Tennis Sanitation or Highland Sanitation or any of the other ones.
It looks like we have a video clip.
We have a video clip, and then we're going to grab the... Let's take the phone call first. No? All right, play the video clip then.
I'm sick because the last person to address you brought up the issue of appointments, and I see that on this list here. I want to say to this council, as I watch this council, I see a council that runs a city in a good, responsive, fiscal, prudent manner, and in its responsiveness to the citizens, I'd like to share, because Mayor, your comment about things that the council doesn't know, citizens should address that during public comment, that being involved in public access television and watching the Cable Commission over there, I want to commend the city of Grant for their cable commissioner, Lauren Setterstrom. The reason I say that is because I think Lauren is the sole person on that commission that actually works out at the community channels, suburban community channels, does a show, and actually sees what's involved in that operation. And specifically, I'll share one instance so you get a sense of what he does for the other people out there like myself that produce shows. For several months, I had asked, and other producers had asked about a telephone that would work when people call in if we're doing a live show. And the staff out there, it just didn't happen. Finally, we asked Lauren about it, and he brought it to the next Cable Commission meeting, and then we had the repairs necessary. So just simple things like that. So I commend you, the City Council, for your appointment to that commission. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Now, when I say works out here, you don't get paid out here. In terms of having a working show, using the equipment, the editing equipment, and
the studio, and the cameras, right?
And the control room. And to that end, you see what works, what doesn't work, what keeps things going, how to stay on top of things. And other than that, we have this staff that we work with directly, but then there's that next layer up above, and it's trying to get them to understand the necessity rather than the fact that, yes, they have a...
It's not in the budget this month.
Well, it's not a priority.
Yes, that's it.
And so sometimes it's always this fighting or pulling teeth. And so it helps that somebody that knows and somebody that's up in the top level to direct the middle.
And I do have the All Around Grant Show. It's Monday night at 7 o'clock, and what I'm trying to do is show some positive things. And of course, I'm biased. I worked in a high school, and most of the time, when you hear publicity about kids, it's either because they're the football star or they're robbing a liquor store or stealing a car. Well, there's a lot of kids that are engaged in doing positive things. We're talking about Young Eagles, Civil Air Patrol, 4-H'ers, Boy Scouts, Young Equestrians. Next month I'm going to be doing a special on the University of Minnesota, the 2 equestrian clubs. And we want to show young people doing positive things, and that's what I'm doing.
Well, you know, in the
We have a phone call, I guess.
okay, we'll take the phone call. You know, you mentioned the 4-H when I was out over at Town Hall over there. I see the 4-H on the wall. I see the equestrian that took first, second, and third place up there on the one local stable. Took all 3 places.
At the state, yes, that was just very unusual. If you notice that sign, by the way, it was 50 years of 4-H in Grant. And again, citizen development, social development is very important with young people, like I said. That's why people move to Grant.
The annual tractor parade?
Yes. Well, that's just a celebration.
Okay, let's take the phone call and then play the next video clip. We're going to run out of time. Caller, are you with us? Question or comment?
And Bob, I'd like to also compliment and commend the cable commissioner to the city of Grant, and I'd like to compare him to the past cable commissioner of the city of Maplewood, the idiot. And I'm talking about the 4 morons and the idiot on the Maplewood Council. The idiot there did all that he could. The only thing he did on the cable commission was try to remove your show. I mean, we're talking about Marv Copen. What a change when you have somebody who's rational and intelligent and supports free speech and positive development of the community like the Commissioner Grant. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, caller. Can we play that last clip? Get it in there? Here we go. This is
Zick. Informational signs, like out here on 12 in Kimbrell.
Yeah.
I could never figure out why there isn't a sign out there that says City Hall.
Oh, that's a good point.
I mean,
Good
so
point.
it's, yeah, I think
Somebody's taking notes of all this, aren't you, Steve? Are you taking notes? Somebody?
I have
That's
a
good
really
point,
good
though.
memory.
It really is. I've noticed that too. You try to tell people how to get here, so. Okay, so,
We have, let Jack.
oh, go ahead.
so that little piece there was really to show that during their meeting, if you have a valid or a good comment to make, the mayor says, come on up and share it.
And they listen, and they put things down. It's somewhat informal. It's not this sitting high above and looking down on the citizenry like the feudal system in England, where there was the royalty and then there were the...
You know, I have to say the mayor and the whole council last night were in just a very up mood, happy.
Positive, yep.
I mean, it was good, and you know that's the way you would hope all city councils would run. Okay, we're down to 30 minutes or 30 seconds here. I'm your host, Bob Zick. This is Lauren Setterstrom with me again tonight. And your show again, Lauren?
It's the All Around Grant Show, Monday.